Welcome back, guys. Back to the intermediates of how to play Smite. Not so much the beginner anymore. For this, I've turned off auto-buy, just for the sake of I can. And we're going to play again in some solo lane here. And we're going to go into the roles of Smite. How do I know what role to play? I mean, there is no right answer. It's whatever you feel most comfortable playing. In this particular round right here, you see me, I am playing as Artemis. Artemis is a hunter class character. She specializes in ranged attacks. Typically, hunter class characters go very well with guardian class characters or support class characters. They typically play in the duo lane, but that's not exclusive, so don't, hold me on that. Hunter class characters, similarly to the mages, specialize in this, back area, back by the ranged minions. You notice that their wave clear is not exceptionally good. It's just that's the way they are. It's also not exclusive. There are hunter class characters with exceptional wave clear. The big key with hunter characters is they strive to do a very similar damage to gods as a god approaches. So as Ra steps into that, I'm going to do a ton of damage to it because he's stationary and I can hurt him. They don't specialize in chasing. They don't specialize in getting away. That's not their thing. They're there to do damage very consistently. And Artemis is built very much to fill out that role, to just do a consistent quantity of damage. She has a very, very methodical pace here. Just boom, 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 boom of her attacks. She has abilities that she can use. Her abilities aren't wasted on minions, but that's not what they're meant for gods. Like Ra here, I'm going to drop this roots right behind him. So if he ever steps in those roots, he'll take hard CC and be stationary just like that. Just free damage. All of the hunter class characters play very differently, but they all have the same thing in common. They do ranged damage like so. None of the other hunter class characters have that root ability. I shouldn't say none, because that's all inclusive. Never say never. So I think this is going to be just kind of like a general overall of how do these classes play? How do I choose a class in Smite? So if you want to stay back on the back lines and do a very consistent amount of damage to the enemy, and that damage, while consistent in the beginning, you become very, very powerful towards the end of the game. The hunter plays very similarly to the assassin in the fact that as the hunter plays, she does physical damage and does a large amount of it over time. The assassin plays differently in the fact that the assassin does a lot of damage physically very quickly. They do a lot of burst damage. That's not saying that you can't build a hunter to do burst damage. Hunters can burst better than anybody at times. The beauty of the hunter is that they strive to do damage and punish the enemy as they try to get close to you or try to run away. They live in that middle ground of physicals have tough times dealing with them because they can't get close enough to them. Like, I'm going to let Ra come out here. I'm going to put down my roots because he's dumb and he's stepped in them every time. So Ra's going to step in my roots. Step in my roots. There you go. So I'm doing damage to Ra, and oh no, he's going to get away. And he very much is able to do that. Just, if you miss your attacks, that's a thing that carries the hunter class can't do very well, is chase down their opponents. That's not true of everyone. Everyone has exceptions. As it turns out, there are quite a few, there are a couple at least in the Hunter class that fill out that role of being able to chase. And are very good at it. So when playing as Artemis, you have to work around that. So I put down my roots here, and as he moves into him, I move up closer to him and play to my advantage. So he's going to take a lot more damage as he tries to get away from me. So look at the amount of damage he took. Hunters also strive very well for the poke, being able to hit guys at range. You notice that my attack here has a very short range. I shouldn't say short. It's got a long range, but it's still limited. I can still hit Ra at this range, but he eventually very quickly gets out of that range. I can hit the ranged minions now and hit Ra a couple of times, but he's out of range now. But my Suppress the Insolent ability is a further ability than my basic auto attacks. So I can shoot it much further so I can prevent a god from escaping if he just needs that last bit of damage to knock him down. So as we move up here, I'm going to show you how Ra can be quickly punished by a good carry. He's going to step into my weeds, and as he goes to leave, I'm going to put my ultimate down, which stuns him again. So he has a lot of trouble getting away from my ultimate, just because of one mistake he made. A good Artemis player can put down the weeds right underneath their opponent and have them step right into him and then capitalize on it. I'm not a good Artemis player. I don't play carries very well, or very often for that matter. You notice that carries depend a lot on their attacks, so a lot of them have abilities that buff their attack speed. Artemis isn't different than that. Her 2 ability, I don't even know where you're going at this point. Her 2 ability allows you to shoot arrows faster that do bonus damage. Anher's ultimate functions in a very similar capacity. It allows you to use your basic attack that does bonus damage a bunch of times consecutively and do a massive quantity of damage. So when it comes to the carry, the one thing you've got to remember is you want to stay back. Melee is not your friend. Don't be a Ra. You want to stay back at your range. Take down your minions the way you're supposed to. Don't overextend. You've got a bow and arrow. Use them. All the ranged carries have ranged abilities, which is why they're called ranged carries. Theming. Don't overextend. Very few of them have escapes. There are escapes in the game, but they cost mana, and if you run out of mana, you're left without an escape. One of the key things you want to remember as the carry is your bread and butter is attack speed. The more damage, your big damage comes from your basic attacks. That's where the center of your power comes from, is your basic attack. So you want to build towards physical power and attack speed, so you can do that damage as much as possible, as often as possible. And as long as you stick to those mentalities, you should be able to succeed as a ranged carry hunter character. You shouldn't have any problem with success in that regard. I think that's going to do it for the hunter. Let's move on to the next class of character. All right, the next class of character we're going to cover is the Guardians. The Guardians are the tank class characters of Smite. You see them here across the top. These are all of the Guardians that are currently in Smite. I'm just going to randomly pick Ares. Ares is a Guardian. He's a terrible Guardian. Let's not pick Ares. Let's pick Ymir. Ymir's free. So when you play Ymir, this is what you'll get. So as a tank, what you want to focus on is taking less damage. Mark of the Vanguard, always a good start. It's a starter item for tanks. The game will help you out with your decisions early game. The one thing that tanks don't do exceptionally well is wave clear, so buying a Hand of Gods is always a good idea. your job as the tank, guardian, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. If you're a league player, good for you. Here in Smite, we call them guardians. Your main job as the tank is to take damage. To go in and just be able to take a metric ton of damage. And your abilities represent that in the fact that they don't do a lot of damage. What they will do is a lot of your abilities will stun, they will peel, they will prevent escapes, they will silence, various things like that. I mean, that's my highest damaging ability that's not an ultimate, and it barely did anything. It's kind of joke version. Now, I can also freeze all the enemies and do, so if I had a carry with me, they would be able to do a bunch of damage to that frozen character while they were frozen. Now, I'm taking a lot of damage right now, but it's because it's early game, and Ra has a much better early game than Ymir does. You notice my wave clear's bad. I can barely do this. That's why soloing with a tank is very tough to do. There are tanks that can do it. There are players that can do it. I've seen players do it all the time. That's an advanced thing. It's not because they're better than everybody else. It's because they know the character they're playing. They know the character. They know the class. They know how to build a guy that can play a game solo. So when you're playing your tank class character, the most important thing you got to do is you got to buy items in this defensive category. I'm playing against a mage, so I want magical defense. I'm just going to randomly select Stone of Gaia because it's here. You want to focus on buying defenses in the categories that the enemy team is comprised of. If they've got a bunch of assassins and warriors, you want to build towards physical. If they've got a bunch of mages, you want to build towards magical defense. It also determines who you're laning against. If you're laning against a god that has a high magic damage ability, then you want to build towards magic damage or magic protection. It doesn't matter if the rest of the characters in the game are physical. You're going to be dealing primarily with a magical damage character. Now, if you're wondering, I've already bought, Stone of Gaia for magical protection, and I'm playing against physical gods. I mean, am I screwed? No, you can sell your items at the shop at any time and change it up. Admittedly, at less of the price, you will definitely buy them for or sell them for less than you bought them for. But it's not a significant quantity as to the point where it will break your game for you. It's like I bought the wrong item at the beginning, and now I've sold my item for so much less. I'm so screwed, we've lost, I've screwed the whole team. It's never in any kind of situation like that. I'm just going to head back and I'll show you. So I've been out and about for a while. So we come over here to my shoes. I can sell them for $200. I can buy them back for $300. It's usually 2/3 of the price. You're not really losing out on that much of your money. The other thing that the tanks generally specialize in is zoning. They usually have very large area of effect abilities that if the enemies stand in, they're going to take a ton of damage. Ymir's no exception. He has his ultimate here, which does this gigantic circle of ice death. It's a huge thing. So you're going to freeze the enemy god, walk past him, and use your ultimate. If he would have been able to get out of that, he wouldn't have taken any damage from it at all. But you can use that zoning to keep your enemies to the point where they either have to walk towards your ally who's doing a ton of damage to them, or they have to stand in your ultimate and take a bunch of damage. The other thing the tanks specialize in is the ability to prevent enemy gods from escaping. Ymir is no exception to this rule. He has a wall that he can just throw up at any time, and no enemies can pass through it. You just deploy the wall, and it's a physical hard barrier. The higher the level, the longer the wall lasts. Various things of that nature. See, as my Ymir is developing in level, you notice he's doing more damage to these enemy minions with his abilities. So as the game develops, you get a decent wave clear. High damage tanks are a thing. I've seen Magical Hades do tons of damage. It's a really damaging build that you can have with a high damage tank. This Midas gets for reasons. You can absolutely play a tank that's very magical heavy, but also with some protections in there so that you're it becomes a very dangerous build because you're beefy enough to be able to take damage for an extended fight, but you also do enough damage that the enemies can't just disregard you. So the things to remember as the tank character: you're there to take damage. Make sure you know what kind of builds your opponent has. Are they a physical character? Are they a magical character? Are they a high burst character? Because every sort of item in the game can counter some form of the enemy. The game's not built to screw you out of it just because you're not a huge damage character. So the key is to know what your enemy's building, know how to beat it, or at least build to protect against it, prevent the enemies from escaping, zone properly, and make sure that you watch your allies back. Because they are supposed to build, if you're running a duo lane, your allies are supposed to build towards the damage and be the clear. You're supposed to be the initiator. As long as you can remember this, you should do fairly well as a Guardian class character. You notice that at this point, I'm at level 11, Ra's at level 9. He really is taking more damage from fighting me than I am taking from fighting him. So he has to watch out for me at this point, not the other way around. And the same can be said, if I'm unkillable, then my AD carry has to worry a lot less about standing alone in a fight because I've died. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for the Guardian class character. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. I'll answer it. I read every comment. This has been Rainer. Peace.